Do you feel something unsettling within you? Something ancient, primal, that awakens when the Joker laughs at chaos on screen, Darth Vader breathes menace, and Tyler Durden whispers of rebellion? We all sense it, though many prefer to remain silent about it, or, even worse, to condemn it. Look at those who, with righteous indignation, reject the very idea of sympathizing with antagonists. Those who cringe when you admit to a strange, inexplicable attraction to these figures woven from darkness and contradictions. How can one admire evil? They ask, clenching fists of moral purity. Their reaction is not merely a testament to ethical beliefs. It's something far deeper, more personal, and dare I say, tragic. Every time you or someone else so fiercely rejects the allure of these dark heroes, you inadvertently strengthen the boundaries of your own inner prison. Imagine, deep within your soul resides an inner exile. This is not evil, not vice in its purest form, but rather a collection of the most powerful, most uncompromising, and from society's perspective, most dangerous qualities. Perhaps it's a thirst for absolute, uncompromising freedom, or the capacity for brutal truth cutting to the quick, or unbridled charisma capable of shattering foundations. All that was once labeled bad, unacceptable, she's shameful, or dangerous, and which, out of fear, you locked away in a dungeon. And so when the Joker appears on screen, unafraid to be himself to his last breath, or Darth Vader, the embodiment of total will, or Tyler Durden, shattering illusions, your inner exile begins to pound on the walls of its prison. It sees in them a reflection of its own suppressed power. The external condemnation we so often observe or even experience ourselves is merely an echo of that internal act of self-denial that occurred long ago. Your rejection of others' admiration for darkness is not just a moral compass. It's the echo of that inner prison where you yourself have confined your most powerful yet unacceptable parts, merely tightening the chains on your inner exile. The irony is that precisely in this rejection, in this fear of your own shadow, lies the source of your constraint. The key to true strength is in acknowledgement. It's in daring to look into that prison, to see your exile not as a monster, but as a part of yourself carrying immense potential. For if we deny our own shadow, we deprive ourselves of access to its energy, its wisdom, its capacity for transformation. We remain incomplete, confined within what is decent and safe, depriving ourselves of depth and genuine power. But why does this mechanism work so flawlessly? Why does this inner exile hide so deeply? And why does its presence so profoundly influence our perception of the world and ourselves? To understand this, we need to return to the scene of the very first transgression. Remember, that elusive, almost mystical moment when an irreversible shift of tectonic plates occurred in the landscape of your inner world. That very moment when a powerful, untamed impulse bursting from the very core of your being was met not with an open hand of acceptance, but with an icy gaze of disapproval, a whisper of condemnation, or even more subtly and traumatically, the sepulchral silence of rejection. At what precise point in your personal, not yet fully conscious history, at the crossroads of childhood and your first vague insights, did you first, perhaps non-verbally, but deeply and painfully, learn that qualities so essential for genuine courage, the kind that isn't afraid to step outside the bounds of what's permitted and be oneself to the last cell, or for independence that challenges conventions and blazes its own trails, for charisma that magnetically attracts and inspires change, or even for healthy, constructive aggression that allows you to defend your boundaries, protect your truth, and force your way through thorns to the stars, that all of this in its untamed form was bad, shameful, or dangerous. It could have been a silent reproach in a parent's eyes, full of anxiety, when your childlike laughter was too boisterous, or your insistence on getting your way too uncompromising. It could have been the sarcastic mockery of peers when you dared to be original, to break rank, to show the world your true, unfiltered essence. Or perhaps it was a silent but pervasive lesson from the system, school, society, cultural norms, where any vibrant, defiant individuality was perceived as a potential threat to the established order, like a stone thrown into the smooth surface of a familiar pond. Here, the bright flame of your personality was meant to be dimmed to a smoldering ember, to a barely flickering spark, so as not to disrupt the general gray uniformity, so as not to stand out, not to raise questions, not to stir things up. It was then, in these unconscious yet deeply ingrained acts of suppression, that the invisible chains began to form by which we, often unknowingly, started to shackle ourselves. We learned to hide those parts of ourselves that seemed too much, too loud, too bold, too free, too powerful. We learned to be ashamed of our own strength. Thus, your inner exile was born, not a ghostly, ephemeral entity, but a living, breathing, colossally powerful part of your psyche that once held the potential to turn worlds upside down, your own and the surrounding one. This is the aspect of you that dreamed of boundless freedom and the chaotic dance of life, like the Joker, of unconditional power over your own destiny and the ability to shape reality according to your will, like Darth Vader, or of a radical, purifying restructuring of the world, an awakening from the slumber of consumerism, like Tyler Durden. But this exile was forced underground into the darkest, forgotten corners of your unconscious. It was driven there by the world around you, and then by your own relentless inner critic, who convinced you. These qualities are not an inexhaustible source of strength and creative energy, but a vice. It is not a gift, but a curse, dangerous for you and for others. And the deeper you drove it, the more strongly you denied its existence, the more paradoxical it became, feeding on the energy of your own rejection, gaining hidden power. Therefore, these antagonists on screen are not merely one-dimensional villains, the embodiment of evil for evil's sake. They are multifaceted, distorted, yet strikingly accurate mirrors, reflecting our own carefully locked away, forgotten exile. We see in them not only destructive force, but also that untamed primal energy, that absolute freedom to be and to act, which we once possessed but were forced to relinquish step by step for societal acceptance, for the illusion of safety, for perceived normalcy. Their appeal is not in their villainy, but in their wholeness, even if that wholeness leads to destruction. They are not afraid to be who they are, even if that who shocks, shatters conventions, or elicits universal condemnation. They are not fragmented by internal conflicts because their shadow is not suppressed or exiled, but integrated into their personality, albeit destructively, without balance with the light. And it is this that evokes in us a deep, sometimes unconscious, but powerful admiration. We see in them what we could be if we hadn't learned to fear our own power, our uniqueness, our capacity for transformation, both creation and destruction, so intensely. This inner exile is not just a personal drama. It is a universal archetypal process, repeating in each of us like an ancient, unavoidable ritual where parts of our soul are separated from the whole to conform to the unwritten and sometimes unspoken laws of the collective. And this separated energy does not disappear without a trace. It merely waits for its hour to present the bill for years of oblivion, for years of non-recognition. We spoke of the mirror that reflects our inner exiles, those who were once us, but whom we imprisoned in the dungeon of the soul. But this is not merely a personal story. It is an echo of an ancient archetypal process, universal for every person, for every society, deeply rooted in our psyche and culture. Imagine a primitive tribe. To survive, everyone had to conform, follow strict rules and unbreakable traditions. Anyone too wild, too unpredictable, too different risked being banished. And banishment from the tribe in those times meant almost certain death. Something similar, but on a metaphorical level, happens within each of us. Our tribe is family, school, society, cultural norms. And to be accepted, to survive in this social landscape, we banish from ourselves those qualities that seem unacceptable or bad. Perhaps it's a wild, untamed freedom that resembled rebellion in childhood and was suppressed. Perhaps it's the capacity for brutal truth that hurt someone's feelings and was condemned, or healthy aggression that was labeled evil, tenderness that seemed like weakness. We cut off these parts like unnecessary, dangerous branches, hoping they will simply wither and disappear without harming our social self. But the shadow is not dead branches. It is a living, powerful, primal energy that does not tolerate oblivion. It merely goes underground, accumulating like an unpaid bill that constantly grows. The longer we ignore this bill, the higher the penalty, the stronger the internal pressure, the more destructive its breakthrough can be. This suppressed force does not disappear. It seeks an outlet, demanding recognition. It can manifest in irrational outbursts of anger, unexplained anxiety, and an urge for self-destruction, chronic fatigue, or far more often in a powerful, sometimes painful, projection onto others. We see in someone else what we have rejected in ourselves, be it freedom, aggression, sexuality, or creative power. And this evokes either an inexplicable, almost hypnotic attraction or furious, irrational rejection, as if we are looking at our most terrifying self. Recall the ancient Greek ritual of pharmakos. In times of crisis, famine, plague, wars, the city would choose a person, often an outcast, a deformed individual, or a criminal. All the sins, misfortunes, and vices of the community were placed upon them as if upon a vessel, and then they were banished or even sacrificed, believing that with their departure, the city itself would be cleansed. This was a ritual of collective shadow expulsion, a projection of all their fears and vices onto one scapegoat to preserve the integrity and illusion of purity of the majority. We modern people, continue this ritual, but no longer in the town square, but within ourselves, banishing our own pharmakeia, those parts that seem unclean or dangerous to our social self. This is why characters like the Joker, Darth Vader, or Tyler Durden are so captivating. They carry this untamed, often destructive, but incredibly vibrant energy. They are the embodiment of that unpaid bill we so diligently hide from ourselves, that potential and freedom we once cut off from ourselves to fit in. They dare to be whole, even if that wholeness is wrapped in chaos or villainy, and in this lies their eerie yet powerful appeal. However, not every shadow shines with magnetism and depth. There are other facets of this inner exile manifesting in figures that evoke not admiration, but merely dull irritation, dislike, or even burning hatred, and they possess none of the charisma that captivates us in great antagonists. We spoke of the shadow that attracts, of its untamed power, of the audacious truth that breaks through falsehood. But the shadow is multifaceted, and there are its facets that evoke neither admiration nor even eerie awe. There are those manifestations of our inner exile that generate only irrational repulsion, dull contempt, or biting irritation. These are not the demons that lure with their charisma. They are rather small, squirming entities that one wants to turn away from, yet they somehow grip stronger than giant monsters. Look closely at them, these archetypes of the uncharismatic shadow that inhabit the dark corners of cinema and our everyday lives. Here, for example, is the cowardly sycophant. He is not a villain scheming for world domination. He is petty, slippery, always hiding behind someone else's back, ready to betray for a shred of benefit or out of fear. In his eyes, there is no fire of the Joker's madness, only a shifty, obsequious gaze, seeking someone to bow to. We despise him not for strength, but for his lack of backbone, for his willingness to dissolve, to become nothing, just to survive, just to avoid facing the truth. He is the living embodiment of cowardice that we so diligently hide within ourselves. Or the petty tyrant. He is not Darth Vader commanding a galaxy. His power is negligible. He might be a security guard at a checkpoint, a bureaucrat at a window, or even a neighbor. But this tiny power inflates his ego to monstrous proportions. He savors every opportunity to humiliate, to show his superiority, to create a problem where there is none, simply because he can. He revels in his ability to make your life unbearable, to make you dance to his tune, even if only for a second. We hate him not for the scale of his villainy, but for his obsessive, senseless cruelty, for how he presses on the most delicate strings of our tolerance. I recall once encountering such a tyrant. He was the manager of a small, utterly unremarkable hotel on the outskirts, short, with bloodshot eyes and a perpetually dissatisfied expression. My reservation was confirmed, but he, with the air of a Roman emperor, declared that people like me are not welcome here. No reason, no apology, just an icy, demonstrative disdain, the sole purpose of which was to show who was in charge. He didn't want money, nor did he pursue any strategic goals. He wanted only one thing, a sense of his own importance, which he could only obtain by humiliating another. At that moment, as he stood with arms crossed, watching me try to understand what was happening, I felt not anger, but a profound disgust. It wasn't a battle with a great evil, but an encounter with rot, with something petty and vile that makes one shudder. His self-satisfied smile was more repulsive than any joker's grin, because it contained neither mad sincerity nor defiance, only dull, senseless power over another's helplessness. And finally, the hypocritical righteous one. This is not Tyler Durden exposing society's rot. He wears a mask of virtue. His speech is full of lofty words, and his actions are ostentatious generosity. But behind this facade lurks cold calculation, envy, or even outright meanness. He condemns others for what he himself is mired in, gladly preaches, pointing out others' flaws, while his own house is full of skeletons. We despise him for his falsehood, for his double standards, for using light to mask darkness. His righteousness is a thin film under which the pus of insincerity boils. These characters, whether on screen or in life, evoke in us not admiration for strength, but rather inner discomfort, because they are distorted reflections of those qualities that we ourselves once exiled into our own shadow but could not transform. They show us what an unintegrated, unhealthy shadow looks like, one that did not become a source of strength but turned into a source of poison. And it is in this poison, in this pain from encountering them, that the key lies to understanding what exactly we forbade ourselves. We talked about those who evoke our instinctive repulsion, the cowardly sycophant, the petty tyrant, the hypocritical righteous one. They are not merely annoying types. They are distorted mirrors, reflecting fragments of our own shadow, those forces that were exiled by us into the subconscious. If you look closely, behind each of these demons lies something originally powerful, something that could have become our invaluable resource if it had not been distorted by fear and non-acceptance. Take the cowardly sycophant, his eternal desire to please, his inability to say no, his willingness to dissolve into others' opinions. This is nothing other than a perverted manifestation of a deep desire to be accepted, to be loved. But in its original healthy form, this desire transforms into the right to genuine connection based on respect, not on fear of rejection. It's the right to healthy aggression that doesn't destroy, but protects your boundaries, asserts your value, your dignity. It's the ability to be yourself, not trembling at the thought of others' disapproval. When you exiled this vice into your shadow, you perhaps forbade yourself precisely this freedom, to be authentic, to be unpopular, to be yourself when necessary. You gave up the right to self-respect, to inner support, to the courage to be inconvenient for others. And this is why the Joker, in his absolute, though destructive freedom of expression, is so captivating. He isn't afraid to be anyone but himself. He doesn't seek approval. He demands it, or simply ignores its absence. And the petty tyrant, his need for total control, his thirst for power, manifesting through the humiliation of others. This is a perverted version of the desire for order, for influence, for the ability to manage. In its pure form, this is the right to leadership, to decisive action, to constructive influence on the world around. It is a powerful creative force capable of organizing, leading, transforming. But when you forbade yourself this power, fearing to become a tyrant or to be condemned for ambition, you may have deprived yourself of the right to independence, to exercise power where it is necessary to achieve your goals. Darth Vader, with his iron will and ability to subjugate galaxies, embodies this furious, albeit dark, force of influence. He is one who acts, who takes power without hesitation, and this resonates with our suppressed need for potency. And finally, the hypocritical righteous one, his outward flawlessness, his false moralizing, his condemnation of everyone who isn't like that. This is a distorted cry of a soul striving for an ideal, for purity, for acceptance. But instead of accepting his own multifaceted nature, his imperfections, he projects them onto others. In its healthy manifestation, this is the right to wholeness, to the acceptance of one's own shadow, to authenticity with oneself and the world. It is the freedom to be imperfect yet genuine. When you exile this vice, you may have forbidden yourself the right to uncensored self-expression, to the acceptance of your multidimensionality, to the rejection of imposed norms that suffocate your true nature. Tyler Durden from Fight Club is the embodiment of this radical authenticity, a challenge to societal dogmas, a call to a life without masks. He isn't afraid to be dirty, wrong, because he is whole in his rebellion. These antagonists are appealing precisely because they dare to be whole in their manifestations. Even if these manifestations are destructive, they do not suppress their inner power, their charisma, their will, their freedom. They are not fragmented by fear of judgment or the desire to be good in the eyes of others. Their vices, which we so fear within ourselves, are actually distorted versions of invaluable qualities: courage, leadership, authenticity, freedom. We have exiled these qualities into the shadow, fearing their destructive power, but thereby deprived ourselves of access to their creative potential. And this exile has its consequences, manifesting in our daily lives, in our choices, and even in our inability to realize what seems so close but remains elusive. We have already touched upon the invisible threads connecting us to those we secretly or openly condemn, but whose power unconsciously beckons. This shadow, this collection of rejected qualities, does not merely slumber within. It actively shapes our life landscape, often erecting invisible walls where there could be open horizons. The non-acceptance of these inner exiles, the fear of acknowledging them as part of ourselves, leads to paradoxical, at times tragic, consequences in the most important areas of our lives. Recall that unrealized project, that bold idea that remained merely a sketch in a notebook. Perhaps its realization required Tyler Durden's audacity, his fearlessness in the face of conventionality, his readiness to destroy old forms for new ones. But the fear of being too much, too assertive, too unique, too wrong made you retreat. Choose the beaten path where your uniqueness remained uncalled for. Instead of manifesting your true creative will, you suppressed it, fearing judgment or failure, which could be perceived as a manifestation of madness or asociality, those very qualities we see in antagonists. Or consider relationships in which you repeatedly find yourself trapped by others' expectations, unable to set boundaries, to say no, to express healthy but inconvenient aggression. This inner sycophant we discussed is nothing other than a distorted projection of your suppressed need for self-respect, for the right to your own will. You fear becoming a tyrant, but ultimately become a victim, unable to express that healthy part of Vader that would allow you to defend your principles, your territory, your personal space. Your fear of being perceived as cruel or selfish deprives you of the ability to be honest and strong, forcing you to make decisions that do not serve your interests and destroy harmony from within. How many times have you backed away from a fateful step, from an opportunity that required a leap into the unknown, simply because you feared judgment, feared being different from everyone else, feared the chaos that Joker's freedom carries? This fear of being bad, inconvenient, uncontrollable makes us make decisions that seem safe, but in reality, they drain our life energy, constrain us, turning potential into regret. We avoid risks not because they are objectively dangerous, but because they require the manifestation of those very shadow qualities: decisiveness, assertiveness, charisma, the ability to go against the grain, which we associate with negative characters, and fear to express in ourselves. And here arises a natural question, the main objection. But you can't be like the Joker. You can't become Darth Vader or Tyler Durden. Of course not. And this is not a call to destruction, chaos, or violence. It is a call to awareness. Your fear of being like these demons from the movies, your fear of showing even the slightest echoes of their negative aspects actually forces you to make disadvantageous decisions for yourself. You avoid risk because Joker's freedom seems like madness, not a creative spark. You suppress your uniqueness because Tyler Durden's courage seems antisocial, not a manifestation of your authentic self. You yield where you should have been firm because Darth Vader's power is perceived by you as tyranny, not as the ability to protect your values and your space. This inner censor, convinced that any form of assertiveness, freedom, or uncompromising nature will inevitably lead to moral downfall, deprives you of access to your own life force. It forces you to play by rules that are not yours, to choose paths that do not lead to your true realization. It turns potential into fear and courage into caution that borders on passivity. As a result, you don't just avoid evil, you avoid your own power, your authentic voice, your ability to create and influence. It is this suppression, this constant self-limitation for the sake of conforming to some external ideal of a good person that leads to inner constraint, to a feeling of incompleteness, to projections onto others, and to an inability to realize your true potential. You don't become evil, but you become less than you could be. But what if behind this admiration for antagonists, behind this unconscious attraction to their wholeness and power, lies something more than just fear and suppression? What if this is only one side of the coin, and on the other lies something we forbade ourselves to see? We spoke of the shadow, that part of us hidden in the secret corners of the psyche, exiled by fear and condemnation. But what if the mirror we gaze so intently into reflects not only what we seek to suppress, but also what we idolize? There's another facet of this profound phenomenon, which Carl Jung called the golden shadow. This is not about unacceptable qualities, but about our most brilliant yet unconscious and unrealized talents, about the potential for greatness that we paradoxically project onto others. Take a moment to consider which cinematic character, or perhaps even a real-life figure, is your true idol or an object of undisguised, almost irrational admiration. Perhaps it's the Joker, with his anarchic genius and absolute freedom from conventions. Or Darth Vader, whose unyielding will and colossal power pierce the screen despite his dark essence. Or perhaps it's Tyler Durden, the embodiment of charisma, rebellion, and fearless self-expression, who lives without regard for others' opinions or societal constraints. What exactly about them draws you in like a magnet? What chord within your soul resonates with their audacity, their courage to be themselves, their ability to transgress boundaries, their untamed strength, or their creative, almost unhinged vision of the world? Look deeper into this admiration. It's not merely a fondness for a fictional character. It's a subtle yet powerful projection. You've unwittingly gifted these characters with your own unrealized abilities, your potential for strength, for freedom, for charisma, for that very authenticity that so desperately seeks an escape from your inner confines. Every quality you admire so much in the Joker, his uncompromising honesty, his ability to shatter illusions, his radical individuality, might be a dormant seed within yourself. The energy you see in Vader, his unwavering resolve and power, his ability to achieve his goals at any cost, may actually be a reflection of your own suppressed will to lead and influence. And Tyler Durden's rebellious spirit, his ability to create his own world, his rejection of conformity, is it not a whisper of your own yearning for absolute freedom and creative madness that you've kept locked away for so long? The paradox of the golden shadow is that it sabotages us through admiration. We see in others what we could become ourselves, and instead of acknowledging that potential within, we leave it suspended like an unattainable star in someone else's sky. We become mere spectators of our own unrealized drama, surrendering our power, our charisma, our uniqueness to fictional or real idols. This admiration, however sincere, becomes a golden chain that prevents us from unveiling our own authenticity. We see their brilliance, but forget that every ray emanating from them is, in fact, a reflection of the light that lives within us, awaiting its moment to break through. This mechanism of projection is not just a psychological trick. It's a fundamental aspect of the human experience. It shows how we unconsciously fragment ourselves, separating our most valuable qualities and placing them outside ourselves. We admire their ability to be whole in their expression, their fearlessness in being themselves, while we, fearing judgment or failure, remain in the shadow of their radiance. The appeal of these characters isn't merely the allure of evil or rebellion. It's the allure of the wholeness, power, and freedom they demonstrate, which we may have hidden from ourselves for too long. They are beacons pointing the way to our own unrevealed treasures, to that version of ourselves capable of living without limits and without masks. And recognizing this is just the first step toward reclaiming our own power. True transformation begins when we stop looking at others' greatness and start seeking our own. This search leads not only to the dark corners, but also to the shining peaks of our inner world. We've spoken of the shadow, an invisible companion that follows each of us, of repressed qualities that, like exiles, languish in the depths of the soul. The true appeal of the Joker, Darth Vader, and Tyler Durden isn't in their destructive power, but in the fierce, untamed wholeness they embody. They are a grotesque, distorted, yet still a mirror of our own suppressed potentials, the will for freedom, the right to anger, the thirst for authenticity, the passion for transformation. Imagine that these archetypes are merely echoes of aspects we once rejected, deeming them dangerous or unacceptable. But what if the key to our authentic power lies precisely within these exiles? What if reclaiming these fragments isn't a capitulation to darkness, but an act of higher integration, an alchemy of the soul that transforms the lead of suppression into the gold of awareness? The time has come not to flee from this shadow, but to meet it face to face, to reclaim those energies that were mistakenly rejected. This applies to both the dark shadow, healthy aggression, the ability to assert boundaries, and the golden shadow, our genius, charisma, potential for greatness, which we sometimes fear to acknowledge within ourselves. In each of us lives not only a hero, but also their antithesis, and it is only in their dialogue that genuine, undistorted wholeness is born. Your task is to recognize the shadow as a part of yourself, as a voice that demands to be heard, so it stops screaming from the darkness. How do you begin this dialogue? I propose a simple yet profound exercise, the shadow mirror. Choose one antagonist who evokes the strongest, perhaps conflicting feelings in you. Ask yourself, what quality of mine, what suppressed energy, what unrealized desire is reflected in this figure? Allow the image to emerge. Perhaps it's a yearning for freedom from conventions that you're afraid to admit. Perhaps it's a desire for control or for a complete relinquishment of it. Write down these qualities. Then imagine a dialogue with this inner exile. Ask it, what do you want to tell me? What are you trying to show me? How can I integrate your strength without destroying myself in the world? This is not a call to become the Joker or Vader. It is an invitation to reclaim those facets you've separated from yourself, but which contain vital energy. It's a rewriting of your own life script, where the villain becomes not an enemy, but a guide to the long-forgotten treasures of your soul. Remember, no quality is inherently bad. It only becomes so in the absence of awareness and control. We have journeyed from individual rejection to personal integration. But what if the shadow is not just an echo of our internal conflicts, but also a reverberation of something larger, manifesting in every story, every hero, every moment of history? What if their true role is deeper than merely a mirror for our inner world?